one of the main reasons why this has so many people flipped out, well, actually, there's multiple reasons. Reason number one, of course, is that carrying a child to term is 14 times more deadly than getting an abortion, and that's for a healthy woman of normal childbearing age. If that woman is a girl who's 11 years old or 12 years old, or a woman in her 50s who's still fertile but wasn't planning on getting pregnant, who got raped or had a failure of birth control, it's not 14 times more deadly to carry a child to term. It becomes massively more deadly. So number one, of course, there's this whole issue of the simple right, the health care right to abortion for women in the United States. That is about to be taken away. And we've got 21 states, I believe it is, probably soon to be 26 states, that already have in place trigger laws or laws equivalent to trigger laws that will immediately criminalize abortion the day that this Supreme Court decision is handed down. Now, all that said, the Supreme Court itself just came out, John Roberts just came out and said this is a terrible breach of trust that they released this thing. But yeah, it's true. He also noted that this is not the final decision. It can still be tweaked. Now, the question is, will this outpouring of public opinion that's happening right now, which, by the way, has a precedent back in the 1930s, and I'll get to that in just a moment. The question is, will this outpouring of public opinion cause the 6 conservatives on the court to go back and say, well, you know, maybe John Roberts was right. We should just, you know, go along with Mississippi. You know, what Roe v. Wade did was it established fetal viability as the threshold, and that back in the day was around 24 weeks. And then in 1992, you had Casey versus Planned Parenthood, and what that decision did was it established 3 trimesters with different rules for each trimester. So let's just kind of wipe those things out and kind of go back to the original Roe decision. This is John Roberts' logic. Go back to the original Roe decision, and instead of saying fetal viability, whatever that may be, which is like right now 22 weeks or 20 weeks, arguably, let's change that to 14 weeks like Mississippi says, and we'll just go along with Mississippi. Now, frankly, I doubt that Amy Coney Barrett, who called herself a handmaid in the Catholic cult that she was part of before she became a member of the Supreme Court, is going to go along with that. And by the way, let me just be very clear. Somebody last week sent me an email going, how come you're always slurring Catholics? You must hate Catholics. This is terrible. This is bigotry. No, I don't always slur Catholics. I love Catholics. I met Pope John Paul II. I was very honored. I spent several hours, you know, sitting within 30 feet of him, had a private audience, spoke with him, shook his hand, as did my wife. I did not grow up Catholic, but I have great respect for the Catholic Church and for my Catholic friends. But the Catholic Church has put hundreds of millions, worldwide billions of their own dollars behind efforts to criminalize abortion in every country in the world, including the United States. So the only context, you will not hear me using the word Catholic in the context of pretty much anything else outside of abortion and birth control, because they are arguably the world's largest lobbying group for criminalizing hormonal birth control and criminalizing abortion. So let's just be very clear about that. And every single member of the court, you've got two people who are Jewish on the court, Elena Kagan and Stephen Breyer. Neil Gorsuch was raised Catholic. He married a woman who was Episcopalian, and when he was asked what his religion was, he refused to say. He said, we go to the Episcopal Church. So he goes to his wife's church. But the Episcopal Church calls itself Catholic. They just don't recognize the authority of the papacy. So basically, we've got 7 Catholics on the court, and all the rest, everybody else on the court is a church-going Catholic. So you've got 7 Catholics on the court and 2 Jews, and here we are. So, all that said, this is, I forgot where I was going before I went off on that rant. Oh yeah, the bottom line here is that, and the biggest concern is not just that this is going to criminalize abortion, but that the logic that they are using, which is essentially that the court should not be making law, a logic with which I agree. Back in when I wrote The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America, I pointed out that in 1973, when Roe v. Wade was passed, Congress in 1974 should have put it into law. That's their job. They never did. They just sat around and said, oh, that's cool, Supreme Court's got this. When Oberfeld, and I know I'm mispronouncing it, I can never figure out how to correctly pronounce that case, the case that gave us gay marriage, when that was passed, Congress should have passed a law and put it into law. They haven't. I mean, there are, when Lawrence v. Texas was passed, and gay sex, basically defined in that ruling as sodomy, was legalized. It should have been put into law. It wasn't. When Griswold versus Connecticut was passed in 1965, this was, in 1965, it was illegal. It was a crime in Connecticut for a married couple to have a condom in their bedroom. Let that sink in. Birth control pills had only been legal for 4 years. It was illegal to have any kind of birth control device in your home in Connecticut in 1965. The Supreme Court struck it down in that case, in Griswold v. Connecticut. And again, Congress never made it into law. They just sat back and said, oh, the Supreme Court's got this. So now you've got a conservative majority Supreme Court, and they're saying, hey, you know, we agree with Hartmann. The Supreme Court should not be making law. Congress should be making law, and Congress never made these laws, so we're going to just reverse this stuff. And I'm telling you, abortion is here, or we're within 2 months of the end of abortion rights. What's next is going to be abortifacient drugs, in other words, abortion by taking a pill in the first couple months of pregnancy, and morning after pills. Those are clearly and loudly in the crosshairs of the anti-abortion crowd. What will be next after that is hormonal birth controls, which, again, the Catholic Church is lobbying against. And now they have been joined by the white evangelical movement. The evangelicals, up until 1980, were supportive of abortion rights and birth control. With the Reagan, and so was Ronald Reagan. He signed the most liberal abortion law in the history of the United States in California as governor. And George Herbert Walker Bush, his wife was like on the board of or somehow affiliated with Planned Parenthood. They were all pro-abortion rights, right to choose, and pro-birth control. But Reagan cut a deal with Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed and these right-wing religious guys that they would pitch Reagan from the pulpit in their churches if in exchange he would come out and be anti-abortion. And that's been the Republican Party's position ever since 1980. 42 years. And now they've got what they want. So what do we do about this? In my mind, there are two solutions. There are two ways, well, arguably three ways, that we can deal with this crisis, and it very much is a crisis. There are a couple of very specific action steps. The first and most obvious is keep Republicans away from the levers of power. Make sure you're registered to vote. Turn out to vote this fall like there was never any other election as important in the history of America, because it may well be true. Step number one. Step number two, pass a law legalizing abortion. Take the Roe v. Wade decision and Casey versus Planned Parenthood, you know, basically the parameters that are found in those laws with the 3 trimesters and the whole kit and caboodle, which has served this country very well for almost 50 years, 49 years now. Take those 2 Supreme Court decisions, turn them into a law, and put it before Congress, and yes, it will probably require overriding the filibuster to pass it. But Kyrsten Sinema is a co-sponsor of abortion rights legislation. And I doubt Joe Manchin wants to get on the wrong side of this one, although it's hard to say. And I know that there are Democratic senators in Congress who are wishy-washy or even opposed to abortion rights. Are they willing to stand up on this? I doubt it. In other words, stand up against Congress. Chuck Schumer says he is going to put such legislation before the Senate. You can bet your bottom dollar Nancy Pelosi is doing the same thing in the House. The problem, and that's a good strategy, and it needs to be done. It should have been done, as I said in the earlier part of this rant, it should have been done back in 1974 after Roe v. Wade was passed. But that law will only stand as long as you have any one of the three branches is the wrong word, institutions that make laws controlled by Democrats. If Republicans get control of the House and the Senate, both branches of Congress, the Article 2 branches, excuse me, Article 1 branches, and they get control of the Article 2 branch, the White House, all bets are off. They'll just reverse it. They, you know, in 2024, let's say in 2024, Republicans take the House, the Senate, and the White House. In 2025, they just pass a law saying, hey, we're just reversing all this stuff. And by the way, while we're at it, let's not just put abortion rights into law. Let's put gay marriage into law federally. And let's put gay sex into law legally. In other words, you can no longer prosecute gay, LGBTQ people for having sex that's not normal, straight, heterosexual. I mean, these things have not been put into law. But again, the Republicans will be able to reverse them. Which brings me to option number 3, which I wrote about at some length today in my rant over at HartmannReport.com, which is titled, Federal Abortion Ban, Court Packing Should Be Back on the Table. And in that article, I basically say everything that I have said to you already. Plus, I point out that back in the 1930s, the Supreme Court was striking down Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal legislation left and right. And there was this group of members of the Supreme Court who were known as the Four Horsemen, right? Pierce, Butler, James, Clark McReynolds, George Sutherland, and Willis Vanderveer. And then they had a sidekick. His name was Owen Roberts, who, were just striking down all kinds of stuff. They took down the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which hurt farmers all across the country, stabilized farm prices. They took down the National Industrial Recovery Act, which gutted, basically, this is 1935. Keep in mind, Roosevelt came into office in 33 and started the process of ending the Great Depression. The Supreme Court undid it. And so Roosevelt came out and said, okay, we're going to pack the court. We're going to replace everybody over 70 with a new justice and let the old guys all collectively have one vote. It created such an explosion that Justice Owens, the 5th guy among the Four Horsemen, changed his vote and started voting with Roosevelt. Now, if the court reverses themselves before this decision comes out, then we're going to have almost a perfect historical parallel. I'm not counting on that. So the option, I think, is to actually follow through with what Roosevelt didn't have to follow through on, but threatened, which is expand the size of the court, add 4 more justices, and do it now.